Hello everyone. In this video, we'll be talking about the second part of Chapter 1, Class 12th History, which is Bricks, Beads and Bones. So let's begin. The first topic which we'll be discussing is tracking social differences. Okay, so in ancient India, there used to exist certain social and economic differences among people. तो अब लोग social differences ट्रैक कैसे करते थे, दैट इज़ हमें पता कैसे चलता है कि उस टाइम सोशल डिफरेंसेस एग्जिस्ट करते थे. So for this, archaeologists they use certain strategies to find out the social and economic differences. The first strategy of which is studying the burials. Burials का मतलब होता है कब्र जहाँ पे लोगों को दफन किया जाता है. So you guys might be familiar with the pyramids of Egypt. इनमें से कुछ were royal burials in the sense that enormous quantities of wealth was buried with them. Similarly, Harappan civilization में भी burials exist करते थे. Now, with respect to the structure of these burials, in Harappa, mostly the dead were laid down in pits. Difference आ जाता था in how these pits were made. For example, in some cases, the pits were lined by bricks and in others, not. Then, with respect to the artifacts, some graves had pottery, ornaments, jewelry. There are certain examples of jewelry given in the book. For example, shell rings, jasper, etc., they were found in these pits. Also, the reason why these things were put in the grave was because there was a belief that these could be used in the afterlife. So, through this difference between the structure of how these burials were made as well as the artifacts which were present in these burials, we get to know that there were social and economic differences which were existing at that time. Now, the next strategy which archaeologists used was to study the artifacts. Now, artifacts can be divided into luxuries and utilitarian items. Now, utilitarians are basically the objects of daily use. They are made out of ordinary material, for example, stone or clay. Some examples of utilitarian items are pottery, needles, cones, etc. Then, on the other hand, we have luxuries. These were another category of artifacts. They were made out of costly, non local material and with the help of complicated technologies. And this was precisely the reason why they were considered precious. An example of luxury would be little pots of faience. Now you've heard about चीनी मिट्टी. चीनी मिट्टी के बर्तन हुआ करते थे जिसमें फूल और पत्ते गढ़े हों. So these were the little pots of faience. Sometimes miniature pots of faience were even used as perfume bottles. Now, with respect to distribution of these artifacts, the luxuries they were usually found in large settlements, for example, Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, whereas with respect to the utilitarian objects, they were uniformly present throughout the settlements, in the smaller settlements as well as the larger settlements. So these were objects जिसे हर कोई use करता था, be it poor or rich. Okay, so now coming on to the next topic, which is finding out about craft production. So there is a mention of one site in particular, which is Chanudaro. This was a small settlement devoted to craft production, and the different activities of craft production included bead making, shell cutting, seal making, weight making, etc. Next, coming to the material used. For beads specifically, the material used was carnelian, jasper, crystal, etc. Artifacts, beads, etc. They were made of different shapes. There is a lot of information with respect to the variety of materials used in the book. Coming on to the techniques of craft production. Now, considering the time, very high quality or we can say refined practices in craft production were in place. So the techniques differed according to the material which was used. For example, in case of statite, which was a soft stone, it could be easily worked upon. You could easily make a variety of things out of it. But in case of harder stones, the techniques they were limited. So zyada se zyada you could make geometrical shapes out of harder stones. Lastly, there are examples of two sites. One is Nageshwar and the other one is Balakot. These settlements were near the coast and they were specialized centers for making shell objects. So the next question is हमें पता कैसे चलता था कि production होती कहाँ पे थी? So for this, archaeologists they look at the following things. First is raw materials कि raw materials कहाँ पे पाए जाते थे. The second is unfinished objects. And the third very important point is waste या rejected material कहाँ पे पाया जाता था. The third point, that is waste, it was considered one of the best indicator of craft work. So थोड़े बहुत teeny tiny bits of waste pieces रह ही जाते थे in the places of production, so they could easily indicate कि अच्छा this was the particular place जहाँ पे production होती थी. Okay, so coming on to the next topic, which is strategies for procuring material. We've seen that craft production was undertaken in the civilization. For this, a variety of material was required. तब ये material आता कहाँ से था? कुछ material तो locally available होता था, but there were certain things which were procured from other countries or areas. So there were terracotta models of bullock carts, which suggest that bullock carts they were used as a mode of transportation. Coming on to the first subtopic, from subcontinent and beyond. So subcontinent में present day India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nepal, Bhutan ये सब आता है. So there are certain examples of locally available material, like there were shells which were available in sites like Nageshwar and Balakot, which we've already discussed. Then there is an example of Shortughai, which is a site in present day Afghanistan. So Shortughai was considered like the best source of lapis lazuli, which was a blue stone. Then Lothal, which is in present day Gujarat, was famous for carnelian, etc. So apart from the fact that there were certain material which was locally available,